Hello, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to take a deep dive into 700R4 4L60E reverse input drums. So I'm going to cover four key topics today. First, we'll give you an overview of the three different drum designs that were in production from 1982 to 2013 through the 700R4 and 4L60E production life cycle. From there, I'll go ahead and talk individual drum components and kind of move into interchange rules so that you have an understanding of what you can and can't do when it comes to working with the different drums into the different vintages of 700R and 4L60E. From there, we'll go ahead and do a physical inspection, a visual physical, to show you what I look for when evaluating a drum for reuse and serviceability. And then lastly, I'll walk you through a couple of clutch pack stack-ups and do a demonstration so that you can see a few different stack-up options available to you when it comes to these drums. So let's go ahead and get a little closer and we'll begin. So as I mentioned, there's three different drum designs that were produced between 1982 and in production in 2013 or 2014. I'm not exactly sure which one of those years was the end of the line for the 4L60Es, but 1982 to early 1987 featured a drum that had a bleeder ball capsule here at the base, which is technically the forward-facing side, and it is readily recognizable as such via this little bleeder ball capsule. The subsequent two designs did not have this. Okay, and in the interior of the drum, everything is largely the same as the other two, except for one major difference, and that is the diameter of the piston pocket. Okay, these drums took a stamped steel style piston. Okay, and they were in production from 1982 to early 1987. So if you're working with a 700R4 core that was produced in early 87, in other words, it's a virgin case, it has not been touched, overhauled, or nobody swapped into a different drum, and you see something like this, you can pretty much be assured that it's an early 1987 model year unit. Alright, so these drums are considered obsolete at this point, and it is not recommended that you reuse them. When I get into the inspection, I'll show you, the two of the most common problems with these things. I mean, if you are familiar with these transmissions, you already know, but if you're new and you're not familiar with them, it'll be good information for you to have. But suffice to say, it's not recommended you reuse them. And, most of the time, they're not going to be in serviceable, reusable condition if you're doing a full and complete proper overhaul. Okay. All right, so the next drum we'll talk about is the second design. Okay, this is in production from late 1987 or mid 1987 to 1992. Okay, two major differences between this drum and the previous drum. The previous drum featured a large square hole here for the feed. Okay, it's in this location right here. This drum features a smaller hole, and it's round for your reverse input feed. Okay, the other major difference is going to have to do with, actually there's three. The other major difference that I'll talk about now is the diameter of the piston pocket. Unlike the early drums, the second and the third design drum took an aluminum piston. Okay, now these pistons are not interchangeable between the first design and the second/third design because they simply won't fit into the first design drum. Okay, remember I was saying the diameter on these is much smaller to accommodate the smaller diameter stamped steel piston. Okay, and the other major difference is going to be, of course, where the bleed or the vent system is. In the second two designs, it's going to be in the piston itself. It's not going to be in the drum. So, second design, small bleed hole, or I'm sorry, small feed hole, no bleed orifice or capsule in the drum. The bleed is designed into the piston. Okay, so this is going to be mid or late 1987 to 1992. Okay, the third and final design, which is now considered the standard for all of these transmissions, 700R4 4L60E, is going to be what we call the square hole design. I know that the first design has a square hole as well, but if someone's referring to a square hole design or large square hole design, they're referring to this latest and current drum. All right, this drum is still in production. AC Delco makes it, as well as some aftermarket companies. And if you have a bad drum and whatever 700 4L60 vintage that you're working with, this is the drum you're going to purchase so that you can install it. These will back service all years. Okay, so again, it is designed to work with the aluminum piston. As you can see, it fits right in there. So, summarize the key differences. First design, the bleeder orifice or bleed system is designed into the drum itself. The piston itself has no mechanisms for bleeding off excess fluid when you're in a forward pattern range setting or neutral or park. Second design, by contrast, the bleed system is in the piston, not the drum. They went from a square hole to a round hole. Okay, and they obviously moved to this piston. And then the third design is going to feature this piston with a large square feed hole. Couldn't find it and see where it was. So, in a nutshell, that is the main differences and their respective vintages of production between the three different designs of reverse input drum. Alright, so let's talk about individual drum components. Alright, we touched on the pistons a little bit. So, with respect to the return spring assembly, this return spring assembly, to my knowledge, has never changed. It was the same in 1982 as it was in 2013. It's never changed. Alright, now what I want to do is reposition the camera because there's a whole host of things that we have to cover when it comes to the rest of the stuff inside these drums, and that includes everything from the cushion plates to the friction discs, the flat steels, and the backing plates, because there were multiple different backing plates available. There were different Belleville plates available, and when I say different, I mean both in design, appearance, as well as thickness. And there were different frictions produced for these drums over the years, including what I will call a first design and a second design friction disc. Okay, the only things that remain largely constant compared to of all the components in here compared to everything else is the flat steels, and there were only two fundamental designs. There was the non-tubular and the tubular. So let me reposition the camera and we'll start going through that stuff. Okay, first things first, going to start with the cushion plate. So fundamentally speaking, we have two different designs of cushion plate. We have the waved plate, which is seen here, and we have a Belleville style plate, which is seen here. All right. So I have these kind of apart from each other to denote what vintage of drum they correspond to or they are associated with. Okay, the cushion waved plate or waved cushion design was in production from 82 to early 87 and used exclusively with the first design drum, the one with the bleed hole. The Belleville style cushion plate, which entered production with the second design drum, this design features multiple different individual selective Belleville plates and can be found in either the second or the third design drum. So I don't know how many people know that this is selective, but I didn't realize it until long after I started rebuilding 700 R4s and 4L60Es, and that's on me for not reading the manual. And we'll look at the manual in a second because there's some things that you need to know, and I'll just show you not only some things that ATSG specifies, there's also some things that I want to make sure that I clarify because they're actually not right in the manual. So here is a sampling of Belleville plates and their respective thicknesses. Okay, compare that to the cushion plate, which to my knowledge has only one thickness, which is 79 thousandths. I have 74 thousandths plate, and it has a set of interrupted lugs, if you will. An 87 thousandths thick plate, again, lugs are interrupted. A 90 thousandths thick plate, contiguous lugs all the way around. And then 98 thousandths plate, interrupted lugs. Okay, and I have a whole host of these Belleville plates. All right, and here's a waved or cushion plate. Okay, the wave cushion plate that I just put down on the table is the same thickness as this one. These Belleville plates are of varying thicknesses, and you'll also notice there are a couple of different colors. Okay, the colors, I don't know if they mean anything or not. I'll be perfectly honest. If you know that that color is important or denotes something specific, please put it in the comments. I'll be very grateful. And I'll learn something. So, anyway, I'm going over these thicknesses because you want to make sure, regardless of what design drum you're using, you manage to a clutch clearance or free travel, if you will, that pack in the drum between 40 thousandths of an inch on the low side and 75 thousandths of an inch on the high side. I like to stick between 40 and 70. Most 4L60Es, you will find that they will set the clearance, using the third design drum, whatever Belleville plate, and whatever backing plate that originally came with the drum. The clearance will be around 40 to 45 thousandths as measured on the bench. That's what I have seen. Some it's going to be a little more, others it's going to be a little less. And if it's a little less, then you may need to source a different Belleville plate or a different backing plate. And we'll cover the backing plates in a second. Well, I should say maybe a minute. So, anyway, as far as interchange, you can run a first design clutch pack in a second or a third design drum. But what you want to do is you want to pair, if you're going to pair early design frictions, whatever steels, because they're all the same thickness, you want to pair that with a wave plate. Okay? And I'll demonstrate that in a second or third design drum, one of the drums that takes the aluminum piston, a little later in the video. But I mention it now because it's, well, one, it's a logical question you probably would have at this point in the video, and two, you may be asking if there's an advantage of this over this or this over this. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the, the clutch stack-up demo portion of this video. All right, but that's Belleville plates and waved cushion plates. So they both provide a similar function, which is to soften the apply and engagement into reverse. All right, now we'll go ahead and we'll talk about frictions, and then we'll move to the flat steel plates. Okay, when it comes to frictions, there are two primary designs, and the differentiating character is going to be their thickness. So your first design, which was in production from 82 to early 87, had frictions that were 78 thousandths thick and were ridged just like this. They had grooves. Okay. Second design frictions appeared in late 1987 or mid 1987, and this is an example of what they may look like. All right, there were a few different styles that I've seen personally. These carried forward into the early 4L60Es up to 1995, and again they have grooves. 70 thousandths thick here, 78 thousandths thick here. Alright, the second and last design of the later two, corresponding to the second and third design drums, starting in, I believe, 1996, may have been 95, but somewhere in that time frame they moved from this grooved style plate to a flatter style plate that had thinner grooves and less of them. Okay, 70 thousandths thick is their dimension. And they were all produced by Borg Warner. These are aftermarket. This is Exity, and they're perfectly fine. I've never had an issue with Exity clutches. They are aftermarket. These are also technically aftermarket. As far as I know, Alto, again, perfectly good clutches. Never ever had an issue with them either. All right, so that's clutches. Let's talk about our steel plates. So not a whole lot to say by comparison. There's two designs of steel plate. Both are 75 thousandths thick. So you're going to have your 82 to 96 design, and then your 97 and up. Okay, 97 and up is when they introduced this tubular steel into the reverse input clutch as well as a low reverse clutch. So if you're building a performance 700R4 early 4L60E, it's a great upgrade to just simply install a late 4L60E steel module into your reverse input drum as well as your low reverse clutch pack. So again, the only defining characteristic here, differentiating characteristic here, is going to be the presence or absence of these pass-through ports in the steel. All right, now we'll cover the backing plates. So as you can see, we have a variety of backing plates here on the bench. The backing plates themselves are also selective. So I have some representatives here. So for these backing plates, you're going to want to look for an identifier. It's going to be an integer, and I believe the range is, I want to say 3 to 7 or 2 to 7, and each of these will represent a different thickness. Now, you should also know that there are unmarked backing plates as well, and those unmarked backing plates can vary in their respective thicknesses. So here's 2 unmarked plates, meaning that there is no number stamped on any part of the top of the bell or top of the backing plate, just the letter S, which appears to be on all of them. So this one is going to be fall into the range of 257 to 260 thousandths. This one happens to be 259 thousandths exactly. And then this one is 245 thousandths, so there's probably a similar range associated with this version of the backing plate. Okay, so these are 2 more examples of the thicker of the 2 unmarked backing plates. And then these are all number 3. Number 3 is going to be 257 to 260 thousandths. This is also going to be the most common plate that you'll see. I just happened to collect some others over the years once I started realizing that they're different, and I saw different numbers stamped in. I would collect them and keep them for reference. I don't know what the hell happened to this one. I got exposure to water, I guess, but this is a number 7, 245 thousandths thick. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ATSG manual that covers the section that covers the reverse input drums. Okay, so all right, first we'll look at backing plates, and then we'll flip to the other pages and look at some of the other stuff. Some of them pertain to mixing drums and pumps. We'll get into that shortly. All right, so here's the backing plate identification chart. As you can see, it has 5, 6, 7, 8. Now this particular version of the ATSG manual is for the 4L60, aka 700R4, from 87 to 93. Alright, so this gives you a chart, and here is the travel. So that's the clutch clearance, 40 to 76 thousandths. So 75, 76 thousandths, 70 thousandths, somewhere in that range on the very high end, and you don't want to be tighter than 40 on the low end. So as you can see, you have a variety of different versions of each component other than the flat steels to adjust your clearance to get you within this target range. Alright, so here's the chart for your Belleville plates. So they show only 2 different versions. As you can see, I have more than 2 different versions on the bench. So again, just wanted you to be aware of that. If you have this version of the manual, there are multiple different versions of those Belleville plates. Then they have the flat steels and the clutch plates. The clutch plates they're saying are 75 thousandths of an inch thick. Okay, that's not accurate. The clutch plates are, as you saw earlier, either 78 thousandths for the early design and 70 thousandths for the later design. Alright, flat steels, they're saying it's 81 thousandths thick, they're 75 thousandths thick. Okay, and then they have the composition faced plate clutches here. They have 68 thousandths and 74 thousandths. Again, there may be other clutches here that they're referring to that I don't have on the bench, but these numbers to me are materially different from these as measured. And these plates are all brand new, just to keep in mind. Yeah, I know these look real dirty, but they've been sitting in the drawer for I don't know how long, but they're brand new. They've never been used. They've never been ran, so they're not, exhibiting any kind of wear. Okay, so this just shows you, the layout and whatnot. Okay, so we're going to focus the next part of the discussion on housing interchange. So in other words, what drums will work with which pumps and which vintage of 700R4 and 4L60E. So we have the stator here on the other side of the bench. I'll actually keep that page open. Alright, we have the stator here on the other side of the bench. And what they're referring to here, when they're talking about compatibility between early and late 1987 units and their respective design of reverse input drums, and the 1993 model year unit, which saw the introduction of the third design, they're referring to this orifice right here. Okay, this is a 4L60E 1995 or 96 pump cover. Now, what they're telling you, here is where it says requires pump cover with a 215 thousandths hole between the sealing rings. They're not describing the pump cover. This is the pump cover. Okay, they're describing the stator. This shaft here, this is the stator. This is the pump cover, and the other half of the pump is the pump body that's not on the bench. So the gist is as follows. The early 87 back to 82, that first design drum, what they are telling you is that you need a stator that features a feed port here that is 95 thousandths thick. Alright? Otherwise, the thinking or the theory is that you'll have too robust an engagement into reverse and imperil the frictions, steels, or somehow put the clutch pack at risk. I've retroed the third design drum, which would violate this rule, by the way, back to 82 through 84 700R4s that I've built, and I've thus far had no issues with function or durability of either the drum or the components inside the drum. So if you have to replace your drum, this second design with the small round hole and aluminum piston, or the first design, the large square hole in the stamped steel piston and the bleeder ball, they don't exist anymore new. So if you wanted to continue to use those drums, you would have to turn the band surface if it was warped. And that's assuming that there's nothing else wrong with that drum. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail when we get to the inspection portion in a little bit. But suffice to say, when it comes to interchange, your later pumps will have this 215 thousandths feed orifice here in the stator, not the pump cover, the stator. And that is what is prescribed for your second design and your third design drum. Okay, let's talk about adaptation when it comes to early 700R4s and the second design drum here for the later 700s. Let's just say you find yourself in kind of an oddball situation where you're working on an early 782 to early 87 that came with the first design drum, and let's further say that drum's no good for whatever reason. Maybe the inner diameter of the sealing ring area is heavily grooved, so it has to be tossed. And then let's say additionally that the only drum you have access to for, again, whatever reason, is this second design drum. You can't get a third design drum, and you don't have another first design drum that's serviceable. So what you can do to adapt the second design drum here is take a 125 thousandths of an inch drill bit and wallow out this feed hole. Alright, if you wallow out the feed hole, you're going to drill it at an angle, and it's going to be oblong, and the semi-major axis is actually going to be greater than 125 thousandths. That's perfectly fine. What you're trying to do here is create enough volumetric space and remove this bottleneck so that you'll have enough fluid flow in behind this piston to correctly and adequately apply the clutch and hold it. So the reason ATSG has you make sure that you don't violate the interchange rules is because this little hole here represents a bottleneck, and it was calibrated with the larger 215 thousandths feed hole in the stator as opposed to the earlier 95 thousandths. Now you can also wallow out the 95 thousandths hole, but either way, this will be a bottleneck for you if you try to pair it with a first design pump in those early 700s. All right, and we already talked about mixing and matching pistons. It's physically impossible. I mean, this is what would happen if you stuck an early piston into a late drum. Obviously, you'd have absolutely no seal whatsoever. Again, very obvious, but you know, wanted to show it just for the sake of showing it. Okay, so we covered all the components. We talked about the interchange rules. Let's go ahead and perform a visual and physical inspection of a reverse input drum. And what I'm going to show you procedurally is going to be the same for all these drums. It doesn't matter. So what you'll want to have handy, in addition to the old Mark I eyeball, is a flashlight and a straight edge of some sort. Alright, so I'm going to lower the camera a little bit so that you can actually see the drum and what I'm doing, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do the inspection. Let's move these frictions out of the way a little bit, get this pump over here. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is perform a visual inspection, because the warpage test that we're going to do may not even be necessary. All right. What I look for is as follows. I'll demonstrate on this early design drum because it does have the bleeder hole. You want to make sure that the bleeder hole is functional, or bleeder capsule, I should say, not bleeder hole, bleeder capsule. For your pistons, for your second and third design drum, you want to make sure that there's nothing plugging up this bleeder orifice. Alright, second thing you want to look at is the sealing surface in here. Make sure that that sealing surface is nice and smooth. If you feel anything at all, you know, catching on your finger, and it could be anything, I mean, unless it's super slight where 800 to 1000 grit sandpaper will straighten it out, I would not reuse the drum. Same applies to the inner diameter sealing surface. So you're going to have two lip seals on the piston, one here and one here, and that's where they seal against. Okay. You can also inspect the base below or beneath the piston. This is not as crucial if it's real rough around the edges, so to speak, you know, kind of looking a bit gnarly. You can straighten it out with some sandpaper. I mean, nothing really occurs here. It's just the bottom of the drum. But if there's any scoring or any imperfections in the sealing surfaces, you want to reject the drum unless you can straighten it out with some emery cloth or sandpaper. The next area you want to look at is the sealing ring groove area. So you have your drum, and then you're going to have your sealing rings here on the stator, and they're just going to mate and mesh just like that. So the drum is going to be turning. Okay, the drum's turning. Obviously the stator's bolted to the pump, which is bolted to the case, and over time sealing ring grooves can be worn into the inner diameter here in the sealing surface, and if that's the case, you don't want to use this drum. Just simply replace it. So if it's an early drum such as this, you would replace it with a late design drum, or if you can find a good used early drum and you just want to run this early drum because you want to be very strict in your adherence to interchange rules with respect to the pump, and you have like an 82 or 84 or whatever 700R, you go through the same procedures. Hopefully you can find a good used one. Alright, third area is the bushing pocket or bushing seating area. When you knock these bushings out, you want to make sure that there are no protrusions in this area here, and this is where I see it most often. I'll knock this bushing out and I have to use a punch, and I'll have to take a conical drift. This is the punch I like to use, and I'll just come in here and bang 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 with the hammer, and I will do my utmost best to avoid making contact with the drum surface. I just want to make contact with the bushing, collapse it in, and then punch it out. So if the unit's been overhauled before bushings have been replaced, then it's possible you may have some protrusion here because somebody smacked the surface of the drum by accident and didn't clean it up. If you have that, then what's going to happen is when you go to install your pump, it'll get hung up. Or it'll install, but it won't spin. I mean, I'm obviously simulating this, but this is how it'll feel like. It'll be very draggy. So you'll have to clearance the bushing, but if it's real bad, then you won't be. I mean, you'll be here for a month of Sundays trying to get that bushing enough space so that the drum spins on the stator, and then you'll probably over clearance it because you'll have an out of round situation. I mean, that's what that protrusion will do. It'll make this out of round, and you don't want that. All right, this bushing is a lot more straightforward. I see a lot less problems with it. You can drive it out with a driver. Just go in like this, boom, it's out. And then you can use a few different bushings here as well. You can use the standard bushing, which is what you see here. Obviously, these bushings are worn. You can also use the 4L60E standard Teflon coated bushing, or the Sonex 700R4 4L60E Teflon coated bushing for the pump body. Okay, so both of those two bushings I just described are intended to go into the pump body, so you would just buy an extra when you ordered or gathered your parts. All right. Another area you want to check at with these drums, check out, that's what I intended to say, is the lug area. Okay, you want to make sure that the lugs are not scored up. There's not, physical indentations or grooves cut into these lugs. If there are, you'll have delayed engagements, you'll have slipping or no apply situations in real extreme cases. So you want to check that. All right, you also want to inspect the female lugs here in the drum that mesh with the male lugs in the Sun Gear reaction shell. If they are heavily worn, like what you see here, you see how these are worn? Let me get a little closer. I don't know that I'd run it because it's going to make for a very noisy transmission. Okay, and real high performance, very high RPM is not advised. So check that out. Now, again, this is not something you would do with these drums because they're readily available, new or even good used. But if, I don't know, maybe you were not in the United States, you were in a country whose supply chain is nowhere near as robust when it comes to transmission parts, then you could repair these lugs by welding into, putting weld into each of these slots that are worn in the lugs here, and then just grind them smooth. And you can use a sun shell, or you can use another drum as a template to let you know how much you have to grind off. But generally, you want to make sure that the sun shell meshes so that it doesn't make noise on operation or during operation. Okay, check the rest of the surface as well, and I'll get to the band surface in a second. But just check the rest of it, make sure there's no fractures, nothing obviously wrong with it, no serious damage. Okay. All right, so if you've done all your visual checks and the drum has passed those checks thus far, then you can move to the band surface itself. Okay, so I would say 95% of the drums, maybe even 99%, I'm just making up stats here as I go along, but the gist of my point is that the overwhelming majority of the drums that you will see coming out of these transmissions are going to be warped in this area to some extent, because almost all of them have standard thickness or standard width 2/4 bands installed, and that's the Borg Warner bands or the earlier 700R4 non-high energy bands. So the easiest way to tell if you're warped here and to what extent is to take a straight edge like this and a flashlight and simply shine your light underneath that straight edge to determine if you can see light coming through. All right, I'm going to try to do this and hold this drum steady. You want to make sure that you're not up on the very top portion of the band surface here, because that's going to, it's not the same height, even though it looks it. So put your straight edge about here, and then shine your light. And do the best you can to keep that light underneath and the straight edge on the band surface. I mean, I'm doing a horrible job of this. I'm trying to do it one hand, but you get the point. If you have a tiny little bit of warpage here, let's just say just a very slight sliver of light is peeking out, then what you can do is grab a sheet of 400 grit sandpaper and work the drum over. I'll go grab a sheet and I'll demonstrate. Alright, so I like to put a towel it's got a piece of wire wheel in here. Get that out of the way. Alright, I like to take the drum here, orient it like this or like this, it doesn't really matter, whichever works. Get a sheet of 400 grit sandpaper just like this, and then on the drum, this is what I like to do. I'll just go around applying moderate to heavy pressure, and I will sand the drum. Okay, I'm doing a poor job because I'm not directly in front of it, and yeah, I know I'm making excuses, but I mean that it is a legitimate excuse. It's kind of awkward. However, again, I think you get the idea. What you want to do is create a fresh surface to the extent possible by hand, so that the band has a nice surface to break into, because it's going to be a brand new band. Now, if you plan on running a wide band, do not do this because you need a fresh surface. So you need to turn the drum or buy a new drum if you want to run an Alto wide red band or a Kevlar band or whatever. Okay, I had to change the battery out, so if the camera perspective changed a little bit, it's because the battery changed and I didn't reset it to exactly the way it was. So again, with this band surface, if you're running a wide band or you intend to run a wide band, just make sure the surface itself has been either machined or you have a brand new drum. And I would recommend you just buy a brand new drum. It'll make setting and adjusting your band clearance a lot easier. If you have a drum that's turned and you're running the wide band, there's probably going to be a couple of iterations of trial and error more than what it would be if the drum was just simply brand new, owing to the differences between diameter of a turned drum versus the standard diameter these drums have when they're new. That's just what I found. Maybe your experience could be different, but I found that when running wide bands, I prefer new drums. And I'll be honest with you, and again, this is just my own thinking on the matter evolving. As of late, I haven't been machining these at all. I've just been buying new drums. You know, I'm talking to my machinist, he turns them, but he prefers, like if it was him, he would prefer to run a new drum as well, because when you remove metal, it does weaken the drum a little bit, and some of these drums are poorly made. And so once you get down that, you know, that 10,000ths of an inch top layer machined off, you start to see some of the flaws. You'll see high spots. You'll see areas where the metal is extremely differentiated. In other words, you have like a hard spot or a soft spot or whatever. These are things that he's relayed to me over the years. And you know, when it comes to drums like this or any band, any drum with a band surface, with a shifting band, I should say, not a reverse drum, but you know, a drum where you have either second and or fourth gear being achieved via application of the band, it's preferred to just get a new drum. Alright, so what we're going to do is I'm going to fire up the air compressor because I want it functioning when we move to the last phase of this video, and that is the clutch pack stack up demonstration phase. So I'm going to do one with an early clutch pack, one with a late stock clutch pack, and then I'll show you what one looks like using an early 82 to 86 clutch pack and a late drum. And like I mentioned in the video, sometimes folks will do that, especially in a high performance type application. So let me get that started and then we'll proceed. We have all three clutch packs assembled and next to their respective drums. So we're going to start with the 82 to early 87. That's the drum with the little bleeder ball capsule. And we have the following components: a 79,000 thick waved cushion plate, a 78,000 thick friction disc that goes on top of the waved plate. Okay. First flat steel, 75,000. the 82 to 86 ATSG manual actually lists these as 77 thousandths thick. So I measured all mine, they're 75 thousandths. So it's possible that there has been wear introduced. I mean, steels wear just like frictions do. So we'll go with 77 for now. And, you know, what we'll do is we'll kind of make a quote-unquote adjustment based on the premise that we're using new steels instead of the used ones we're actually using. Okay, so steel clutch, and then the backing plate we're using is going to be a number 6 at 270 thousandths thick. And then our snap ring. Now I didn't touch on this earlier, but the return spring snap ring and the clutch snap ring, to my knowledge, and all my research I've done, never changed in their respective designs. This snap ring was the same with the return spring assembly through the entirety of production. Same with the clutch snap ring. As far as I know, these are not selective, nor was there an engineering change made to them. So, as previously mentioned, you want to manage to between 40 and 75 thousandths of an inch in clearance. And for this clutch, I'm perfectly okay with using feeler gauges. You can measure it with an assembled pump with the drum, you know, mated to the pump, and just put air in the reverse input feed port, set up your dial indicator and measure the travel via the indicator, or you can use feeler gauges. There's some transmissions and some, you know, clutch packs that I will not do that. I will not use feeler gauges. I only use the indicator and the air. But those are mostly late model clutch-to-clutch style units where margin for error when it comes to clutch clearance is very, very minimal compared to these older legacy units. You know, here you have a little bit more of a, you know, margin for error, you know, latitude, if you will, than you do with the later model stuff. So what I have here is my minimum spec, 41 thousandths. Now, if you're looking at this here on the screen, you can tell that we have quite a lot of clearance in there. Okay. So before I measure it, let me bring the 82 to 86 4L60 manual over, and we'll show you the page for the reverse input clutch. So you'll notice here for inline 4s and V6s, there's one less friction plate. So everything that I've been giving you so far with respect to, you know, clutch counts and clearances and everything, I've been for V8s, but just know that for the 4 cylinders and smaller displacement V6s, the 60-degree V6s, they take one less clutch plate. So you're going to have 3 flat steels, 4 clutch plates in the V8s, and 1 wave steel. And that's what we have in this drum. And it's readily apparent that we have borderline too much clearance. So I have the 40 thousandths. Now, when I measure clearance, I want to start my measuring 180 degrees out from the opening of the snap rings, or the ends of the snap rings, I should say. And then I'll go to 3 and 9. Okay, I don't measure at the 12 o'clock position as I reference at the location of the 2 ends of the snap ring. Okay, now, again, this is obvious as hell. We have way too much clearance. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go right to the max spec. So 24, 25, and 26 gives us 75 thousandths. Okay, this is fitting. This feels like it's about between 75 and 80 thousandths to me, at least at that location. That was the 6 o'clock. Here's the 9 o'clock. And here's the 3 o'clock. Okay, as you can see at the 3 o'clock position, if you can see this, bring it a little closer. Okay, we still have plenty of room between the snap ring and the top feeler gauge. So I would say this has about 80 to maybe even 83 thousandths worth of clearance. So let's see. We'll do 25, 26, and 27 thousandths. Actually, let's do 26, 27, and 28. So 1, 2, and 3. That's 6. This would be 80 thousandths. or 81 thousandths rather. No one will accuse me of doing math on the fly very well. Okay, over here it's a little tight, but that's it. Alright, so what do you do if you're in this situation? This is technically correct as far as the number of flat steels, clutch plates, and the wave plate. And we have one of the thickest backing plates available. So if you find yourself in this situation, and this is strictly speaking not kosher per ATSG or whatever, but what I've done, because it's happened to me a few times, very early units where I was using this stack up, is I would introduce an additional flat steel. Okay, I would introduce an additional flat steel into the drum, and then clutch, steel, clutch, and so forth. And then I would just swap the backing plates to a much thinner plate and see where that left me. So I'm gonna put the 270 thou aside and see if I can get away with proper clearance here with a 245 thou thick backing plate. Alright, it's going to be close because we're kind of right up against the minimum spec, and I can just tell by eye. But let's see if we can pull it off. So 20 to 21 thousandths, 41 thousandths. Here's our 12 o'clock, so we'll check at our 6 o'clock. That's good. Check at our 9, perfectly fine. Check at our 3, good for you and me. So, again, this is not kosher per proper procedure, documented manuals, publications, but it does work. For the few that I've done this with, I've not had issues. Alright, now this was a good example as to what can happen if you try to run it back with used steels. And this is why I've been going to just installing steel modules with all my rebuilds. Unless I'm doing a refresh or even a repair, I'm purchasing an entire steel module. So there's 4 frictions and 4 flat steels, or excuse me, 3 flat steels in this particular clutch pack. At least that's what's supposed to be there. So if we have 2 to 3 thousandths worth of wear per steel plate, as well as maybe 1 to 2 thou worth of wear per cushion plate, you can conceivably have 8 to 10 thousandths of additional clearance baked into this clutch pack, and that is material. So if we had the correct and proper setup, but I had brand new reverse input steels, my supposition is that we would have been within clearance, maybe 68 to 70 thousandths. It would have been still on the high side, but it would have worked, and it would have been fine. Okay, remember, this is only on in reverse. This clutch pack does nothing in forward pattern range settings or neutral or park. It just sits there and does, nothing. So it's not necessary to be a minimum specification when it comes to your clearance with the reverse input pack. You just don't want to be too tight, okay, and you don't want to be too loose. So again, it goes back to margin for error. You have some margin for error here. You just don't want to, get too crazy with your clearances. So we'll air check that in a minute. Next, it's going to be our 87 to 92 stack up. This is going to be mid 87. So we're going to run with a 74 thousandths thick Belleville plate. And then we have our 4 flat steels of 75 thousandths. Again, none of these steels are new. This is a prepped steel. You'll notice here, somebody took sandpaper, which is a good idea. You can prep with sandpaper. Somebody took sandpaper and prepped the surface. And they actually did a very good job. It wasn't me. Somebody else did that. Alright, now, if we look here, at the relationship between the top of the backing plate and the bottom of the snap ring lug, where the groove is. That's just about perfect. Okay, we're using a 245 thousandths unmarked backing plate and the same clutch snap ring. Okay, that's just about right. So it feels like it might be like 50 to 60 thousandths, somewhere in there. So let's go ahead and do 20, 21, and 22. So 12 o'clock. So antipodal to that is 6 o'clock. Feels good. Feels good. Feels good. In fact, it feels like there's probably a little bit more clearance than what I have here on the 3 gauges combined. That's pretty much exactly how they typically go together if you're running all new stuff. Now again, if we had 77 thou thick steels, it would be even better because it would be on the lower end of the spec. And that's kind of where you want to start all of your stack ups with any clutch. You want to be in that bottom 1/3 spec range ideally. So if your range is 15 to 45 thousandths, you know, you want to be in that, 15 to 60 thousandths. You want to be in that 15 to 30 thousandths range. And I'm just making this up. That's not the spec for this clutch, but any clutch pack, hypothetically speaking. All right, lastly, we'll work with the 3rd design drum. 87 thousandths for our Belleville plate. 75 thousandths. You notice the wear pattern. This indicates that this side of the flat steel faces the Belleville plate. So you want to kind of maintain that. And then our late model frictions, they are 70 thousandths. And our tubular steel, 75 or 77 thousandths. These all measured 75 thousandths. So like I said, the book, or the books, give, you know, kind of slightly differing information, but 75 to 77 thousandths is what you can assure to be working with when it comes to the flat steels in this clutch in any year. So again, same deal. I think we're at ideal clearance, or close to it rather. We'll use the same 3 feeler gauges, 20, 21, and 22, and we'll see where we are at. Okay, this feels a little tight. Again, a little bit of effort to get it in there. A little bit of effort to get it in there. Okay, you notice this snap ring is also smaller. So I'm not sure why that is. Maybe they did change them. Either that or it's just worn out, but it's noticeably smaller. Alright, they're all 60 to 62 thousandths thick. Alright, I'll put it back in. We'll air check. Actually, let me do this first. Let me take the contents out of the 82 to early 87 drum and stick it in this late model drum and show you how you can prospectively install an early stack into a late drum. Because all that really matters here is proper arrangement of friction steels, cushion plate and backing plate, and the clearance itself. Alright, I'm gonna first omit this extra steel, and we'll just install the wave plate. Okay, we have way too much clearance, and it looks to be roughly the thickness of that steel. So let's go ahead and incorporate it and restack. All right, that looks about perfect. All right, still a little much. I think what we would need to do is swap to a thicker backing plate. I mean, I say I think because it looks like I am actually over clearance. So let's go ahead and put a 260 in there and see what happens. All right, it's a little bit better. It looks like it has about 65 to 75 thousandths clearance. That would be my guess, just by eyeball. Let's see how accurate that eyeball is or isn't. So we're gonna do 24, 25, and 26. It would put us right at book max. So 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock. All right, that feels good. That feels good. Okay, that feels good. I mean, I'm having to kind of not force it, but a little bit of effort to get the feeler gauge set underneath the snap ring, so it's fully installed, or goes in there as far as it can go. So if you want to install a earlier style stack up in a late drum, you can do that as well. Some builders prefer this stack up over the one featuring the Belleville plate, because it's said that these will crack or break under high RPM. I've never seen one come in broken, and I've not ever had one come back to me because of that plate broke. And I built plenty of street strip and or all out full race type builds, 700R4s, 4L60E. So I don't know, I just thought I'd mention it because I periodically would see builders talk about doing this early stack in a late drum, so I wanted to show it to you. All right, let me fire the compressor up. We will air check and then we'll wrap up. This has been a much longer video than I had anticipated, but there is a lot to these drums. They're kind of deceptively rich in terms of context and material to share with you. All right, now we're going to go ahead and proceed with an air check, and I'm only going to do it on this drum. I mean, they're all the same in when it comes to air checking. So this is going to be our third design, current modern drum. It's got the large square feed hole, and of course uses the aluminum piston. So what you want to do is try to get your nozzle to the best of your ability to seal as much of this feed port as you can, and then you want to see the clutch apply. So there's going to be a lot of hissing sound or air whooshing out of the bleed orifice. That's normal. Okay, all you want to be able to do is apply this clutch, and when air is being fed into the circuit, you don't want to be able to move the frictions like this. Okay, the clutch should be completely solid, if you will. You shouldn't be able to move frictions around while the circuit is being charged. All right, so it's kind of awkward, but we'll give it a shot. All right, that's what you want to hear. So you notice I released the nozzle, the trigger, but I didn't release the nozzle right away. I waited another half second or so. Let's do it again. All right, that is a healthy clutch. So like I said, you always have a little bit of hissing because you have designed in fluid vent systems to prevent drag or centrifugal apply when this clutch is not in use, and it's only in use in reverse. Okay. One other thing I'll mention when it comes to the clutch itself, as far as like its function and its welfare, make sure that you check the lugs on the hub portion of the forward clutch drum, because if those lugs are in bad shape, and if they're kind of ridged or there's heavy grooves cut into them over time, then these frictions will hang up. And if it's really bad, you'll have a no apply situation. So here's what I'm talking about. So you want the lugs to look like this. There's no grooves. They're straight up and down. They're not worn, or at least not excessively worn. They're serviceable. This drum itself leaks at the shaft, and it'll be featured in another video where I discuss and show how to repair this. But suffice to say, you want to make sure that the lugs on that forward drum are in good shape, because that's integral to the function of the reverse input clutch pack. Alright, let me think for a second if there's anything else I want to bring up or anything I want to touch on when it comes to this clutch. I think I've boiled the ocean to the fullest extent of my knowledge and my powers. There's still probably some things that I don't know, and you know, if you do, or if there's some omissions that you saw in the presentation, or anything that you feel that I may have stated incorrectly or inaccurately, please post it in the comments. All I ask is you be polite, and I will be greatly appreciative of that. So otherwise, if you do have questions, comments in general, go ahead and leave them below. And as always, I really appreciate you hanging with me. And if you watch the whole thing, extra special thanks, because I know, you know, videos can be long, and attention spans sometimes, you know, they outlast the attention span of the viewers. So I really appreciate it if you watched up to this point. So again, enjoy the rest of your day or evening. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. I'm constantly doing these transmissions, so I'll always be putting out fresh content. And so if you want to learn more about them, or, you know, any either aspect in general or anything in particular, you know, go ahead and please sub and click the bell notification icon so that you can be notified whenever I produce and publish another video. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening.